your brain cannot actually turn off. Even when you're resting. Even when you're trying to sleep. Even when everything around you is quiet. In fact, one of the brain's most active systems only becomes fully active when you stop doing anything at all. Tonight, we'll calmly explore why your brain keeps producing thoughts, memories, and images, especially at night, and why this isn't a malfunction. We'll move through this in slow, simple sections, so you can listen closely, or let the ideas fade as your attention softens. Because once you understand what your brain is doing, it often becomes much easier to let it continue without needing to control it. We often imagine rest as the absence of activity. When the body stops moving. When the eyes close. When the world becomes quiet. But for the brain, rest does not mean inactivity. It means a change of mode. Your brain is not designed to switch off like a machine. It is designed to constantly process information. When external input slows down, internal activity increases. This is why thoughts often become louder at night. During the day, your brain is focused outward. Sounds, movement, tasks, conversations. At night, that stream of input fades. And something else takes over. A network in the brain that becomes active when you are not focused on the outside world. This network is not random. It is not noise. It plays a crucial role in memory, emotional processing, and your sense of self. In neuroscience, this system is known as the default mode. It is what your brain does by default, when it is left alone. This means that when you lie down, close your eyes, and try to stop thinking, you are actually entering the state where thinking naturally increases. Not because something is wrong, but because your brain is finally doing what it was built to do. This realization changes how we interpret mental noise. Thoughts at night are not a failure to relax. They are a sign that the brain has shifted inward. And once we understand this shift, the experience often becomes less frustrating. Because the goal is not to turn the brain off. It is to stop fighting the process that has already begun. And to understand why this process exists at all. But this raises a deeper question. If the brain never truly turns off, what is it actually doing when nothing is demanded of it? It's natural to think of the brain as something that should rest the way the body rests. When muscles stop moving, they relax. When the eyes close, vision stops. So we expect the same from the brain. That at some point, it should simply go quiet. But the brain was never designed for silence. From an evolutionary perspective, a completely inactive brain would be dangerous. Long before modern life, your brain's primary job was not to think abstract thoughts or solve problems. Its job was to keep you alive, to monitor the environment, to predict what might happen next, to connect past experiences with present conditions. For most of human history, the world did not become safe just because the sun went down. Night was not rest. It was uncertainty. So the brain evolved to remain active, even when the body was still. This activity did not require conscious effort. It happened automatically. And it still does. What changes is where the brain directs its attention. When you are awake and engaged, your brain is oriented outward. It filters sounds. It tracks movement. It responds to tasks and goals. But when external demands fade, the brain does not shut down. It redirects. Instead of processing the outside world, it turns inward. This inward focus is not random. The brain begins to revisit memories. It replays fragments of conversations. It simulates possible futures. Not because you asked it to, but because this process is essential. One of the brain's core functions is integration. It constantly tries to make sense of experience by connecting pieces together. During the day, there is too much incoming information to do this deeply. At night, that pressure disappears, and the brain finally has space to work. This is why trying to stop thinking often has the opposite effect. The moment you remove distractions, the brain gains access to unfinished material, unprocessed emotions, loose memories, unresolved questions. These are not problems. They are signals that integration is underway. From the brain's perspective, this activity is productive. From your perspective, it can feel intrusive, especially if you believe that rest should mean emptiness. But biologically, rest means something different. It means shifting from active response to internal organization. The brain is not idling. It is sorting. This sorting happens whether you pay attention to it or not. And it becomes more noticeable when the world grows quiet. Another reason the brain never fully turns off is energy efficiency. The brain uses a large amount of energy, even at rest. In fact, the difference between an active brain and a resting brain is smaller than most people expect. What changes is not how much energy the brain uses. It's how that energy is distributed. When you stop focusing outward, energy flows into networks responsible for self-reflection, memory, and imagination. This is why the mind can feel especially vivid at night. Images appear more easily. Thoughts feel less structured. Time feels different. The brain is operating without external constraints. It is free to wander. And wandering, for the brain, is not wasted time. Studies have shown that this resting activity plays a role in learning, creativity, and emotional regulation. People who are prevented from entering these states often struggle with memory and mood. In other words, the brain needs this quiet activity. The mistake is thinking that awareness must follow it. You don't need to engage with every thought for the process to work. Just as digestion happens without your attention, mental integration does too. The brain does not ask for control. It asks for space. And when that space is provided, it will fill it, calmly, continuously, and on its own terms. This is why the brain feels hardest to quiet when you try to force it. Control introduces effort. Effort signals urgency. Urgency activates alert systems. The brain interprets this as something requiring attention. And so it becomes even more active. Not because it's resisting you, but because it's responding exactly as designed. Understanding this changes the goal. The goal is not to silence the brain. It is to stop interrupting the process it naturally enters when conditions are right. Because once the brain is allowed to operate without interference, something interesting happens. Thoughts begin to lose their sharpness. They still appear, but they carry less weight. They drift instead of demanding resolution. And this leads to a deeper layer of brain activity, one that feels very familiar, but is rarely understood. And this brings us to something surprising. There is a specific network in your brain that becomes most active when you stop trying to focus at all. When you stop focusing on a task, something very specific happens in the brain. It does not become quiet. Instead, a different system takes over. Neuroscientists call this system the default mode, not because it is simple, but because it is what the brain returns to when nothing else is required. It is the brain's natural background state. You enter this state more often than you realize. When you stare out of a window, when you lie in bed with your eyes closed, when your mind drifts during a familiar walk. The default mode is active when attention loosens, and it becomes especially strong at night. This system connects areas of the brain involved in memory, emotion, imagination, and self-reflection. It is where your sense of me quietly lives. Not the version of you that solves problems, but the version that remembers, anticipates, and wonders. When the default mode becomes active, the brain starts to move differently. Instead of reacting to the present moment, it begins to travel through time. It revisits the past. It simulates the future. It blends memories with possibilities. This is why thoughts at night often feel less logical and more associated. One memory leads to another. An image triggers an emotion. A small detail opens a long chain of thought. The brain is not trying to solve anything. It is exploring connections. This exploration has a purpose. During the day, experiences arrive faster than they can be fully processed. Conversations, decisions, emotions, many of them remain incomplete. The default mode gives the brain a chance to integrate these fragments, to connect what happened with how it felt, to update internal models of the world. This process is slow. It does not follow a straight line, and it does not respond well to pressure, which is why it becomes most visible when you stop directing attention. At night, the conditions are ideal. External input decreases. Expectations soften. There is nothing to respond to. So the default mode expands. This expansion can feel peaceful or overwhelming, depending on how it is interpreted. If you expect silence, the activity feels like noise. If you expect activity, it feels natural. This is why two people can experience the same mental state very differently. One person hears too many thoughts. Another experiences gentle drifting. The difference is not in the brain. It is in the relationship to the process. Importantly, the default mode does not require conscious involvement. It works whether you observe it or not. Thoughts will continue to appear even if you stop following them. Images will rise and fall even if you don't react. The system is self-sustaining. And this is where a subtle misunderstanding often occurs. Many people believe that nighttime thinking means something is wrong, that they are anxious, that they are failing to relax, that their brain is overactive. But in many cases, the opposite is true. The brain is doing exactly what it is meant to do when given space. It is reorganizing internal information. It is adjusting emotional tone. It is preparing for future situations by replaying possible scenarios. None of this requires effort. In fact, effort interferes with it. Trying to suppress the default mode activates attention systems. Those systems are designed for action. They bring alertness, evaluation, and control. This creates a conflict. One system is trying to drift. The other is trying to manage. The result feels like restlessness. Not because the brain is out of control, but because two modes are competing. When the default mode is allowed to operate without interference, its activity gradually softens. Thoughts become less structured. Images become less distinct. Time loses its sharp edges. This is often the point where sleep begins to approach. Not as a sudden switch, but as a gradual shift. However, there is one more reason why the default mode feels especially strong at night. It has to do with emotion. Because the brain does not only process events, it processes meaning. And emotions that were muted during the day often surface when the default mode takes the lead. This is not a problem. It is part of how the brain maintains balance. But it explains why nighttime thoughts can feel more personal, more vivid, and harder to ignore. Understanding this makes a difference. Because once you recognize that the default mode is not something to fight, it becomes easier to let it unfold without engagement. And when engagement drops, intensity follows. Which brings us to an important question. If the brain's default state is active and meaningful, why do thoughts often feel louder specifically at night? And this leads to something many people experience but rarely understand. Why thoughts don't just continue at night. They seem to grow louder when everything else becomes quiet. At night, many people notice the same pattern. The body is tired. The room is quiet. There is nothing left to do. And yet, the mind feels louder than ever. Thoughts that barely appeared during the day suddenly become clear. Memories resurface. Questions feel more urgent. This can be confusing. It seems backward. If the body is slowing down, Why does the mind feel more active? The answer is not that the brain is speeding up. It's that something important has disappeared. During the day, your brain is constantly filtering information. Sounds, movement, light, conversation, tasks. This constant input acts like background noise. It occupies attention systems and keeps internal activity in the background. At night, that external noise fades. The brain does not receive fewer signals, it receives fewer distractions. And when distractions disappear, internal signals become easier to detect. Thoughts were already there during the day. You just couldn't hear them as clearly. This is similar to what happens when a room becomes quiet. You don't suddenly gain better hearing. You simply notice sounds that were always present. The brain works the same way. When external input drops, the signal-to-noise ratio changes. Internal processes move to the foreground. This makes thoughts feel louder, even though their intensity hasn't increased. Another factor is control. During the day, your attention is directed. You decide where to focus, what to respond to, what to ignore. At night, that structure disappears. There are no immediate demands, so the brain is free to move without guidance. Freedom sounds pleasant, but it can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you expect the mind to be quiet. Without a task to anchor attention, the brain explores freely. It jumps between ideas. It follows emotional associations. It revisits unfinished loops. This is not restlessness. It is unstructured activity. And unstructured activity feels louder because it lacks boundaries. There is also an emotional component. During the day, emotions are often regulated automatically. Social interaction, movement, and goals help stabilize mood. At night, those regulators are gone. This allows emotions to surface more clearly. Thoughts at night often carry emotional weight, not because the emotions are stronger, but because nothing is buffering them. A small worry can feel significant. A minor memory can feel vivid. The brain is not amplifying emotion. It is simply removing dampening mechanisms. This is why nighttime thinking often feels more personal. The content shifts from practical to meaningful, from tasks to identity, from what happened to what it meant. This shift is part of healthy emotional processing. But if you interpret it as a problem, tension appears. Trying to suppress thoughts creates resistance. Resistance activates alert systems. Alert systems increase clarity and focus, which makes thoughts even more noticeable. This creates a loop. The more you try to quiet the mind, the more clearly you hear it. Not because it is misbehaving, but because attention is sharpening around it. When this loop is recognized, something subtle can change. Instead of engaging with thoughts, you can allow them to exist without response. Not pushing them away. Not following them. Simply letting them pass through awareness. When engagement drops, thoughts lose momentum. They continue to appear, but they stop demanding resolution. This is often the moment when thinking shifts into something softer. Images become fragmented. Narratives dissolve. Time feels less defined. This transition is not something you can force. It happens when effort fades. And effort fades most easily when you stop interpreting activity as a problem. Nighttime thinking is not the enemy of sleep. It is part of the transition toward it. The brain does not switch states abruptly. It moves gradually from structured thought to loose association, from clarity to drift. But there is one more layer to this process. Because while the mind is doing this quiet work, something equally important is happening beneath awareness. Not in thoughts, but in the body itself. And while the mind is drifting through thoughts and memories, the brain is quietly coordinating something physical that makes real rest possible. While your thoughts move quietly in the background, the brain is doing something else at the same time. Something physical, something essential, and something that does not require your awareness at all. Rest is not a pause in brain activity. It is a change in priorities. When you stop actively engaging with the world, the brain begins shifting resources toward maintenance. Much like a city at night. Traffic slows. Lights dim. But behind the scenes, systems are being checked, repaired, and reorganized. One of the most important changes happens in how the brain communicates with the body. As activity levels drop, the brain gradually increases signals associated with safety. Heart rate slows. Breathing becomes more regular. Muscle tone decreases. This shift does not happen because you decide to relax. It happens automatically, when the brain determines that no immediate action is required. This decision is based on patterns, not commands. Stillness, darkness, lack of demand. These cues tell the brain that it is safe to redirect energy inward. At the same time, the brain begins to regulate itself chemically. Levels of alertness-related signals decrease. Neurotransmitters associated with wakeful focus become less dominant. This does not shut the brain down. It changes how information flows. Instead of sharp, focused pathways, activity becomes broader and slower. Communication between regions becomes less precise, but more flexible. This flexibility is important. It allows different parts of the brain to synchronize, to align rhythms, to move towards states that support deep rest and eventually sleep. Another quiet process is memory consolidation. Experiences from the day are not stored exactly as they happened. They are reorganized. Relevant details are strengthened. Irrelevant details fade. Emotional tone is adjusted. This is why memories can feel different the next day. Less intense. More integrated. This work begins before sleep. It does not wait for unconsciousness. Even while you are resting and aware, the brain is already preparing. There is also a physical cleaning process underway. As activity patterns change, fluid movement in the brain increases. This movement helps clear metabolic byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. It is a slow, rhythmic process. Not something you feel, but something that contributes to mental clarity over time. None of this requires effort. In fact, effort interferes. Trying to control the body keeps alert systems active. Alert systems prioritize readiness. Readiness delays restoration. This is why rest works best when it is allowed, not managed. When you stop monitoring whether you are relaxing correctly, the brain does not need instructions. It needs permission. Permission comes from absence of urgency, from letting go of evaluation, from not checking whether progress is being made. These physical processes unfold on their own timeline. They do not respond to impatience. They respond to consistency. This is why even brief periods of quiet rest can be beneficial. You do not need to sleep immediately for the brain to begin restoring balance. Simply lying still, without demand, is enough to start the shift. The body may feel heavy. Breathing may deepen. Thoughts may slow or fragment. These are not signs of losing control. They are signs that control is no longer needed. As this state deepens, the boundary between thinking and sensing begins to soften. Thoughts become less verbal. Sensations become more prominent. The mind drifts closer to the threshold of sleep. Not because you forced it, but because the brain has completed enough internal coordination to move forward. However, there's one common mistake that often interrupts this transition. It has nothing to do with noise or light. It has to do with intention. And this leads to one of the most counterproductive habits of all. The harder you try to stop your thoughts, the more active your brain becomes. It seems logical to think that sleep begins when thoughts stop. So many people approach rest with a single goal in mind: to quiet the mind. They try to push thoughts away, to replace them, to control them. And when that doesn't work, frustration appears. But this effort is based on a misunderstanding of how the brain works. The brain does not interpret the instruction "stop thinking" as relaxation. It interprets it as a task. And tasks activate attention systems. Attention systems are designed for focus, evaluation, and control. They sharpen awareness. They increase monitoring, which is the opposite of what sleep requires. The moment you try to stop a thought, the brain must first detect that thought. Detection requires attention. Attention increases clarity. So the thought becomes more noticeable, not less. This creates a paradox. The harder you try to stop thinking, the more clearly you hear your thoughts. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because the brain is following its design. There is another layer to this. Thought suppression doesn't remove thoughts. It postpones them. When you push a thought away, the brain marks it as unfinished. Unfinished material remains active. It waits for another opportunity to surface. This is why suppressed thoughts often return later, sometimes more vividly. The brain is not trying to bother you. It is trying to complete loops, trying to resolve unfinished information. This is why nighttime is such a common time for persistent thoughts. The brain finally has the space to revisit what was postponed during the day. When you add resistance to this process, the system becomes alert. Alertness signals that something requires attention. So the brain stays awake. Not because it is restless, but because it believes there is work to do. The alternative is surprisingly simple. Instead of trying to stop thoughts, you stop responding to them. You allow them to appear without engagement, without judgment, without evaluation, without follow-up. This does not mean encouraging thinking. It means removing fuel. Thoughts gain momentum through attention. When attention softens, momentum fades. A thought may still arise, but without response, it does not continue. It dissolves on its own. This is not something you need to actively do. In fact, effort interferes. The shift happens when you give up the goal of silence. Because silence is not a requirement for sleep. The brain does not need emptiness. It needs non-interference. As engagement decreases, thinking naturally changes. Thoughts become shorter, less structured, less personal. They turn into fragments, images, sensations, fleeting impressions. This is the mind transitioning, not shutting down, but drifting. The moment you notice this drift and try to hold on to it, attention sharpens again, and the process resets. So rest emerges not from control, but from allowing loss of control. This can feel counterintuitive. We are taught that effort produces results. But sleep is one of the few states that arrives only when effort is released. The brain already knows how to do this. It has done it thousands of times before. Your role is not to guide it. Your role is to stop interrupting it. Once this is understood, something changes. Thoughts stop feeling like obstacles. They become background movement, like clouds passing through the sky. Present, but not demanding. And as the brain senses that nothing needs to be resolved, nothing needs to be fixed, nothing needs to be monitored, it begins to move naturally toward deeper rest. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, gradually. Which brings us to the final idea. Because when the brain is allowed to continue its quiet activity without interference, you no longer need to stay aware of the process. It can carry on without you. And this leads to a gentle realization. You don't need to fall asleep. Sleep arrives when the need to manage disappears. As your brain continues these quiet processes, there is nothing you need to do. You don't need to follow every thought. You don't need to reach a certain state. You don't need to make anything happen. The brain already knows how to move from activity into rest. It has done this countless times before, without instructions, without effort. Thoughts may still appear. Images may drift through awareness. Sensations may come and go. None of this needs your attention. Just as the body breathes without being directed, the brain continues its internal work without needing supervision. Nothing here requires control. When attention softens, processes unfold naturally. Memories settle. Emotional tone adjusts. Signals slow. The mind does not suddenly go silent. It simply becomes less defined, less focused, less interested in holding on to anything. If at any point your awareness fades, that's fine. The information does not disappear. It blends into the background, the same way sounds blend into silence. You don't need to remember what came before. You don't need to anticipate what comes next. The brain does not measure progress. It responds to absence of urgency. And as urgency dissolves, rest deepens on its own. So you can let thoughts pass without telling a story about them. You can let attention loosen without checking whether it's working. You can allow the brain to continue doing what it does best when it is left alone. There is nothing missing, nothing unfinished, nothing that requires resolution right now. The processes you've been listening to will continue quietly, whether you stay aware of them or not. And you don't need to stay. You can remain here for a while, or you can let the moment slip away. Both are natural. Both are enough.